Today, answers matter more than ever before. That's why IBM is helping businesses manage customer questions with Watson Assistant. It's conversational AI designed to work for any industry. Let's put smart to work. Visit IBM.com/Watson Assistant.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast, sponsored by Manscaped. Today, I talk NFL Draft with The Athletic's Dane Brugler. Follow him online at DP Brugler. Read him at The Athletic. He's very good insight. We discuss tackle options if the Redskins want to sign a vet but draft and develop another player when and if they trade Trent Williams. We discuss tight ends in the middle rounds. Brugler mocked a tight end to the Redskins in the third round. To me, he's an intriguing guy. And, of course, we discuss all the options the Redskins have at number 2. Also, don't forget to check out my work on ESPN.com. Before I get to Dane, I wanted to address for a minute the Trent Williams situation. I have a couple thoughts, as always, and bear with me. Just be a couple minutes, and I'll get you on to Dane. First of all, it's a shame because Trent Williams will go down as one of the Redskins' best all-time linemen, and he'll now leave here before he should have. That happens. But usually it's because someone isn't playing at a high level or isn't worth the money. Williams has durability issues, but is still one of the best left tackles in the game. I know it gives people pause, and it should, to consider paying him that much money when he misses multiple games every year. But he is a different dude on the field. It kind of took a while for me to warm to the idea of him being a captain. I know he's well liked and respected in the locker room. I always have enjoyed my interactions with him over the years. That hasn't stopped me from reporting the Redskins' side in this situation, and they have always believed it's about money, as I have always written in any story about this. Always. I know Williams would disagree with the money aspect in terms of that's what it was all about, but if you report his beef, you have to report how the other side sees it. As for his trade value, it's kind of tough. Clearly the Redskins would like to somehow get a first-round pick in return. That's going to be difficult, and I do believe they know this. Nobody offered a first rounder in the fall. Whatever you read, nobody offered that to them. It's hard to see anybody doing that now. Impossible, I can't say that unless I talk to every team who might be interested. But I can tell you that people in the league who have made deals what they'll say is a second rounder is probably the highest they'll get. Some people thought it might be a third. Some thought you could get 2 picks in return. So you look at the Dwayne Brown situation a couple years ago when he went out to Seattle, they got a third and then a future 2. Something like that, I think they would happily take. I don't know why you'd trade him just for a third-round pick. I think there would be great reluctance to do that. In that situation, I'd just bring him back, let him play so you don't have to worry about the position now, address other areas, worry about it next offseason, and if he leaves, you're going to get a third-round comp pick in return in 2022. I don't think the Redskins should now just give him away. If I'm the Redskins, I have some resolve over this. The wrong way to do business at this point is to simply say, you're tired of it, let's get him out of here. That way you ensure a bad return. It wouldn't shock me either if they somehow accepted a player in return, taking perhaps one of their own needs off the table. Finally, it'll be interesting to see which teams emerge from him. Several teams have already talked to Williams and his side, and the Redskins have talked to a few teams as well. I know Houston and Cleveland wanted him last fall. Again, I was told nobody offered a 1. I stress that I say that I was told that because some of these people only going to go by what they were told, but it's been consistent in what I've heard. The Browns still have a need at left tackle. They are in position to draft a tackle at 10. However, what if the tackle they like is gone? So maybe the smarter play for them is to give Washington, let's say, a second-round pick or some sort of combination of a third and a future 2, whatever, and then take that need off the board. Of course, the Browns might like a couple of those tackles, be happy with any of them at 10, then they could keep the other pick or picks and spend the cap money elsewhere. Because here's the guarantee, folks. Nobody's going to trade for Trent if they can't sign a new extension, and he's not going to want to go somewhere if he's not signed an extension. So that's why the agent is talking to these teams or trying to go out there and seek his own deal, because they've got to work out his compensation before then they can go work out the Redskins. And just this is a little detour, but there's always a chance that Trent and his side could work out a deal with the team, and then this team goes to the Redskins and say, we'll give you a 4th-round pick. Well, I can tell you that's not going to cut it. Anyways, let's get back to it. So while it is a good draft for tackles up high, and my understanding is what I've heard from people that usually you reach for tackles up high. That's not going to be the case this year. These are legitimate tackles in terms of the first-round grades and where they'll be picked. But none of them are of Trent Williams' caliber. That helps the Redskins. Would Houston still be interested? They already have Laramie Tunsil left tackle. They made a big investment in him last fall. But when you have a coach in power like Bill O'Brien, these teams don't always see big picture, and simply collecting talent is the goal. I'm not saying they're going to do this. I don't know. I don't believe that they've talked to the Redskins. I don't know that for sure. I don't know that they may have contacted Trent. I don't know. But I asked someone about it because the Athletic reported that Houston might still have interest. This person said he wouldn't be shocked, and because of the reason I said about O'Brien. Who knows? Don't take that as a report. We're kind of walking through this process. However, if Houston did that, then they're going to move Tunsil to right tackle because there's zero chance Trent goes there to play on the right side. The Jets will be one of the interested teams, I do believe. New England backed out in the fall. They had shown interest. My understanding is they kind of backed out when they found out that he wanted more money. The Rams need a tackle. They might re-sign Andrew Whitworth, but Sean McVay knows Williams very well, of course. Minnesota has a big need at tackle. They're also a team that is kind of in a desperate situation in that, is their window closing? Depends what goes on with Kirk Cousins and their future there. So maybe that's a place, but they don't have the cap room. So they'd have to do a lot of maneuvering to get him. So we'll see what happens. Folks, buckle up. And now my conversation with the Athletics draft analyst, Dane Brugler. Enjoy.
Hey guys, it's Bram. I just wanted to say hi. Thank you for supporting the John Keim Report. It's been a pleasure working with John and putting this podcast together every week. And I want to introduce you to our new sponsor, Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. I groom. Yes, I groom. And I always use the traditional methods, which were semi-dangerous. Clipping around there is not the easiest thing to do. And that's why I love the products from Manscaped. The engineer team spent 18 months perfecting the greatest trimmer ever created. And they just released their new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. I've used it. It's awesome. I know the first time you pick it up, you're going to be like, I'm a little nervous doing this. Don't be. It is easy, and there is no problems at all, no accidents at all. And one of the coolest real features of the whole thing is they've got this LED light, which illuminates the grooming area. So for a closer, more precise trimming, I know you want to be careful. I'm very careful as well. It's an awesome, awesome piece of equipment. Get 20% off free shipping with the code KEIM, K-E-I-M, at manscaped.com. Once again, 20% off and free shipping with the code KEIM, K-E-I-M, at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code KEIM.
And now I'm joined by Dane Brugler, who is an NFL draft analyst for The Athletic, has had a great rise through social media. And one of the benefits of social media is getting to read people like Dane, because I think it's broadened the perspective of many. It's given many people a voice, and Dane has taken advantage of that for good reason, because he does very good work. And I don't say that just because, Dane, that you went to school, the same school that my brother did, Mount Union. So
yeah, Division III powerhouse. It's funny. I went there for sport management, and that actually helped me get started in scouting, because Pierre Garçon and I were seniors together, and so that kind of introduced me to the scouting world, because I worked for the football team as my senior year. And so I was in charge of helping a lot of these scouts come through Alliance and show them, the football facilities and practices and things like that. And so that helped my networking getting in the world of scouting. And it's a lot of those relationships I still have today.
And that's, it's funny, because I was going to ask you about Pierre, because I know that you were there at the same time. What was it like watching him at that level? Because, he was a very good NFL player, let alone what he would do in Division III.
Yeah, he was dominant, and Division III in the OAC, it's John Carroll and
Right.
Ohio Northern, Mosquito, just a lot of teams that there's some quality play for Division III, but it's nothing like you see on Saturdays on TV at the SEC Big Ten level. But he was so good. He's such a good athlete. He could also throw the ball. I mean, there were a lot of times we'd have packages for him to do an end around or something like that and let him throw the ball because he had such a good arm. And he started in Florida and had a kind of a little bit of a journey to get to us at Mount Union in Ohio. And but it was fun watching him my senior year. Unfortunately, Wisconsin Whitewater was just a little bit better in the Stag Bowl, the national title game that year. But nonetheless, it was a great final year for both of us.
Did you? I mean, not to harp on Pierre and this be the last one on him, but did you think that he could end up? I mean, it's hard to predict an NFL career like he had, but did you think he would be that good in the NFL? Did you think there was a chance?
Everybody, all the scouts that came through, I told him, I was like, listen, this guy is, at worst, he's a mid-round pick because that's just the type of guy you want to take a chance on. Really quality human being, a really good athlete. But even with that said, I think he exceeded my expectations. It's just tough when you play against D3 corners, and then how is that going to translate against NFL level corners? Obviously, it's a huge jump, and it's really tough to account for that type of jump in competition. So I think he really exceeded everybody's expectations. But nonetheless, I thought he was a mid-round pick, and the Colts, I think they got him in the 5th round, and that ended up being a huge steal for them.
And because I want to switch gears now to the draft, and with the Redskins now, and we're taping this after learning about the Redskins giving Trent Williams permission to seek a trade. And that means they have to, assuming they end up trading him, they have to now find a tackle, and the draft has some pretty good tackles. They're not necessarily in position to get one of those tackles right now. I mean, unless you took one at 2, which you're not going to do. But I'm curious, first of all, what are the options maybe if they add a 2nd-round pick or just stay in the 3rd round? What are some options in those rounds? Because we hear about the top-end tackles. Are there guys in that 2nd to 4th round range that you look at and say, hey, give this guy a year, or maybe this guy is someone that people are sleeping on who could help sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a top-heavy class at the tackle position. We know about Jedrick Wills and Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs, Andrew Thomas, these guys. But we might have 6 or 7 tackles go 1st round. Guys like Austin Jackson, Josh Jones. I think Ezra Cleveland is in that mix now with what he did at the Combine. I think if you talk about 2nd round, Isaiah Wilson from Georgia, who, big right tackle, redshirt sophomore, still very young. He's a Brooklyn kid who is still growing, not physically. He's a monster of a guy, but still growing mentally with his technique, being more consistent. And so that's why we're talking about him as being more of a 2nd round guy. And then if we get into the 3rd round, that's when you get into some guys that, there's a reason we're talking about them as 3rd round picks and not 1st or 2nd round picks. So, Lucas Niang from TCU, who missed half the year with a hip labrum tear. He was a right tackle at TCU, really talented player who doesn't always look pretty, but he gets the job done more times than not. Prince Tega Winogo from Auburn, born in Nigeria, came over to play basketball. Started playing football in high school, but it was mostly defensive line, goes to the offensive line. And so he's very young in football years, and he's still coming along. But you see the natural athleticism, and so it might take him a year or 2. Similar thing with Matt Pert from UConn, where I think he's kind of in a lot of ways the ideal developmental tackle because he has size, he can move. He just needs to tweak some of the the finer points of the position. But again, it's tough because the tackle position it usually gets overdrafted. So a guy like Matt Parrott from UConn, ideally that's who you get in like the 4th round as your developmental tackle. But in today's NFL, with everybody needing so many tackles, better bet that Parrott ends up going in the 3rd round. You have to draft him maybe a little bit earlier than you once thought.
And, so the other scenario for them would be if they traded, let's say they make the trade with Miami, you get 5 and 18 in the 1st round. At 18, and you went over all those tackles, is there a guy, and I know it almost feels like right in that range might be the gap between where top guys are gone and then the next wave starts after several picks after that. Is there someone that you could see falling to 18 in that scenario that may fit what they need at left tackle?
I think Josh Jones and Austin Jackson, both those guys would be quality contenders for that pick. With Josh Jones, he is a guy that's really blossoming at the right time. And when you, my favorite part of the draft process is learning about these guys and their journey. And when you look at Josh Jones, who's a redshirt senior, you look over his career at Houston. He was in 3 different offenses. He had 5 different offensive line coaches.
Right.
So that really stunted his growth and, kind of held him back a little bit. But you see the natural talent. He has really quiet feet. He does a nice job climbing, engaging linebackers. Looks natural in space. He can sink. He can use his hands. So I think Josh Jones, I think there is a little bit of a gap after those top 4. But I don't think it's a huge gap. And so I think Josh Jones belongs somewhere in that, the mid to, 15 to 25, that type of range. And then Austin Jackson, kind of similar. He's kind of a little bit different. He's younger. He's a true junior that came out. Probably could have used another year, but the natural talent's clear. So Josh Jones, Austin Jackson, I think either one of those guys would make a lot of sense there if Miami was able to, or if Washington's able to make that trade with Miami.
And it's funny because in terms of the Redskins trying to trade Trent, this draft class, if you need a tackle in the first round, you can find him. I would imagine that could end up depressing I wonder how the impact of that would have on their ability to trade Trent because of what's in this draft.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And it's because it's like you mentioned, it's not just this draft class. You look at, what's available out there.
Right.
I mean, Jason Peters is available. It sounds like, there's definitely a few offensive tackles that teams can go after. And so these teams are going to have options, and it will be interesting. What is the asking price for a guy like Trent Williams, who is obviously, when he's on the field, he's one of the best tackles in the league. Now he's obviously on the downside of his career, or, trending towards that way. So, how many more years does he have at a, high level? And what's, because it doesn't really matter how good a player is. Your value is only what a team's willing to pay. So, it should be interesting. And you look at, a team like the Browns, who, they have first round pick, second round pick, and then 2 third-round picks. So, maybe one of those third-round picks, is part of a sweetener to get a guy like Trent Williams. So it will be an interesting dynamic to this offseason, just the tackle class, both free agency, trade, but then also the draft and, just all the options, if that drives down the value at all.
Okay, and now let's turn to what I want to look at a couple other options. And then the first scenario, they stay at 2. And I know in your latest mock, you had them taking Chase Young, and that's still the guy that I think they're going to take. What is your assessment of Chase Young compared to some of the other guys who have come out in recent years?
He reminds me a lot of Bradley Chubb, except I think he's just a freakier version of that. A couple years ago, Chubb was a 4th overall pick, had pretty good rookie year. Unfortunately, missed last year with an ACL. He's not quite as technically proficient as the Bosas when they were coming out. I mean, that's really what separates Nick Bosa for what he did as a rookie. His understanding of his biomechanics, his understanding of technique, just really rare for a player that age. So while I think that, I don't think Chase Young is going to have the same rookie year as, say, a Nick Bosa did. But when we look back 5 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're talking about Chase as being, just a better NFL player, because I think his ceiling is higher. He can continue to get better and better and better with his power, with his hands, with his athleticism. There's just, the sky is the limit for this guy. He's just a special, special talent. And that's why it's going to be really tough, I think, for the Redskins to trade out of that pick when they have a guy like Chase Young staring them right in the face. The second most important position on your roster. I think they feel like they have the first most important position after what they did with Dwayne Haskins last year. We'll see how that plays out. But when you have a chance to get a guy like this, you don't pass it up. And so I'm with you. I'd be pretty shocked if Chase Young is not the pick at number 2.
And it's funny because one of the things that people will point out, well, he was quiet in his last couple games, didn't get the sacks. when you watch those games, there are a lot of reasons for that, and you can't always measure the impact by sacks. And I'm not trying to give him excuses.
Oh, yeah.
But I watched the games. I saw what they did. And even against Clemson, he was in the backfield a lot. And that's where my next – first of all, I'm curious your assessment of those games. And then second, one of the things I've noticed with him, and then I had heard someone else say this, and then you notice it a little bit more, he's a great get off the ball. And it's about finishing with a little bit more refined technique, with maybe finish with a rip move so he's not always happening, so he can turn it sharper. And, I think that would have resulted in some more big plays against some of that, some of those games. But I'm just curious your assessment on that.
Yeah, and to your point about the last 3 games, it's talking to guys at the Combine like John Runyon, the Michigan left tackle. He admitted, he's like, we changed our entire offense to stop him.
Right.
The way we were rolling out the pocket, the way we were, leaving a back or a tight end home to help. They literally changed their entire offensive game plan to stop one player. And so sacks are great. And, that's how we measure a pass rusher in a lot of situations. But it doesn't tell the whole story. It's all about disruption. And Chase Young's ability to just completely alter a game plan for an offense is a value that doesn't show up in the box score necessarily. And, it might not show up in the stat sheet, but it is a big, big impact. And so I think that we saw that in each of those last 3 games. To your point about, just how he can get a little bit better with his technique. And, Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach, just an absolute legend at Ohio State, and what he's done over his time in college football. I think that's one of the things you really like about Chase Young is I call it the LeBron factor. These guys won the DNA lottery, the way they were born, the things that they were born with that, you and I and a lot of people listening, like we'll never know what it's like to have those types of gifts that were just, given to them by God. And now it's one thing to have those gifts, but it's another to really cultivate it and really work at it. And so, that's why I call it the LeBron factor, because as good as LeBron is, he works his tail off to be the best in the world. And so a guy like Chase Young, who has all these gifts, he really works at it too, because he wants to be the best. And, Larry Johnson was such a big factor on him, just learning the different moves, keeping his hips, his hands, his feet all in sync. And I think that really what separates Chase Young from a lot of these pass rushers that I evaluate at the college level coming out is their hips, their eyes, their feet, always on the same page. And that really allows you to set up your moves, a 2-hand swipe or, just the different scissors action that they like to use at Ohio State. It's something that is really, really impressive with Young, because he's, again, not only just gifted athletically with his power, but he understands how to use his hands, and he's still growing. He's a really smart player. He can sense draws, he'll sense screens, he sees things happening, and that happens from tape study and putting in the work. So there are areas, he's not a perfect player, obviously. I think there are times where he's guilty of guessing a little bit, needs to be a little bit better of a finisher at times. But I don't think it's going to be something that, he can't correct with more coaching and more just muscle memory and getting better at it.
I agree. And you're also talking about, Del Rio and Ron Rivera. They've had in their background Julius Peppers, Von Miller, Khalil Mack. I know that they really would like to build this defense around him. But then the other option is, there's that school of thought. Tua is going to be sitting there. So most likely, unless the Bengals do something we don't expect. So how did you compare Tua to Dwayne Haskins as prospects coming out?
Well, strictly as prospects and not talking about, durability or anything like that.
Right.
Tua, they're obviously very different. Haskins is a bigger guy, has a bigger arm, where Tua is a little more mobile. He's more twitchy. He's undersized. He's only 6 foot compared to a guy like Haskins. But I think the movement skills really is what separates them. Tua doesn't have necessarily the same type of arm strength as Haskins has, but he can still, because he's so twitchy with his body movements, his hips, his throwing action. He's able to get the ball out and onto his receivers in time. The way he can improvise. But, you just can't talk about Tua without talking about the durability
Correct.
concerns. And
That's the
that's
biggest
really,
concern.
yeah. And it's it's what makes him a wild card because, it's even today where we just left the combine, we're in the pro day season. Teams are, they've built their boards. Now they're kind of refining them, moving guys up and down a little bit, really putting things in stone. And I feel like Tua, we have no idea because until we see him throw, it's just there's no chance of understanding what his future and how you project him, because when you watch him throw at Alabama, he uses so much of his body, his hips, and so a guy coming off a fractured hip, until you see him throw, you really can't make an assessment on him. It's great that he's supposed to be cleared on March 9th. Everything's been going well so far in terms of the doctor signing off on every step of the process. But until we see him out there throwing, I don't know how anybody could really have a great feeling for how where he's going to end up and where he's going to be. The medical information coming out of the combine was, things were okay, but teams are cautiously optimistic about it because there's a lot of stuff. It's not just the hip; it's both ankles.
Right.
It's his finger. It's his knee that he tweaked. So there's a lot of things that each team had to kind of work through with Tua. And he spent the entire day. He said he got to, I think he got there at like 7 a.m. and left at some point in the evening. I mean, he was at the hospital the entire day for every team to kind of go through him. And I don't know. I mean, I do not think he's as much of a lock in the top 5 as a lot of people think, just because the durability factor. And not every team is going to have that high appetite for risk. So,
right.
I hope the NFL is better if Tua Tagovailoa is part of it and he's healthy. So I'm hoping that he can be, and teams are convinced that he is, and he ends up going top 5. And I'm hoping that is the case because I think it'd be a lot of fun. But I'm just not sold based off of just what the buzz is around the league leaving the combine. They're cautiously optimistic, but there's still a lot of I don't know. It's still there's a lot of uncertainty about where he's going to end up.
And I think that's why if you're the Redskins, that even though if someone says, well, they may think he's better than Dwayne Haskins, but you really have to weigh it with the Tua with his durability versus the impact of a guy like Chase Young too. And I think that's where I think that durability is going to be a big issue because it's hard to get around that. And that, and I think that's where I think from the Redskins perspective will be a deciding factor, assuming they just stick with Chase Young because there aren't those questions about him. And you have an organization that has had a lot of trouble with injuries. I think it'd be hard to then take a chance with your first pick and a guy who's often hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
It's tough, and it's the most important position on your roster. And I think something that Tua is he's 6 foot, but he's 220, so he's got some meat on the bones. But the biggest thing with him is how he loves to improvise, and he just needs to do a better job taking care of his body. Not taking those extra hits and not holding the ball until the final seconds. And it's tough because that part of that is what makes him such an effective quarterback, because he'll get outside the pocket, he'll improvise, he'll allow his receivers just to be athletes, go get open, and he'll find them. And that's great. That's part of what makes him successful. But it's also what takes, put some of those extra hits on him. And you worry about long term, the ability to hold up physically and stay on the field. And it's tough because you leave it up to your doctors, and they have to make an assessment. You have to trust it, and so it's a very complicated evaluation. I'll say this: I will not be shocked at all if Jordan Love or Justin Herbert is a second quarterback drafted.
I think you're right there, and I think that's why I wonder too if there's going to be the market to trade up for number 2 that everybody thinks. And I've had some people tell me that that teams are calling up about. That teams would call up to trade for Chase Young at 2. So I think that's where the other part, because that's why I don't know if the Redskins, it's hard to know, will they get what everybody assumes they would? Because if you're Miami, you have to give all that up to go get Tua if that's what you want, or can you sit at 5 and get Love or Herbert? I think that's going to make it really interesting.
Well, and here's the other thing about Miami is I don't think they would have any problem just staying pat and adding a left tackle or a pass rusher, or, just building that roster, maybe trying to trade back and getting more ammo in next year's draft to make sure they can go up and get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. So I don't think that they feel like they have to get the quarterback this year. I don't think they feel that pressure. They know it's a rebuilding process. And so they've got a lot of ammo, a lot of draft capital. I wouldn't be surprised if, they're not completely in love with any of these quarterbacks. They decide to trade back if they can, pick up picks in next year's draft, and then just, next year is where they really target one of those quarterbacks.
And it's funny, and this is my I want to move on to your third round pick for the Redskins in the mock, but my last thing on that too is if I'm the Redskins, you can kind of look the same way. You have a chance to get Chase Young, and if you don't force the quarterback there because you have a guy that maybe you want to try and develop, and if it doesn't work, then as of right now, you're looking at two really good quarterbacks in the draft next year, and then there's always that other guy that emerges that could give you another option if you wanted to go that way. So, but let's go to the your third round pick in your mock, Adam Troutman, the tight end from Dayton to the Redskins. They clearly need a tight end. Now he's become like I don't know about darling of the offseason, but he's certainly a guy that's made some noise in the offseason. What do you like about him as a player and a prospect?
Yeah, and I wrote about him back in September. I really liked when I studied him over the summer because he got mid-round grades over the summer from scouts. And so I checked him out, and I really liked what I saw based off the tape. And so I did a piece on him back in September on The Athletic, just talking to him about the transition from quarterback to tight end. He never caught a pass in his life in a game until his redshirt freshman year at Dayton. He was always the quarterback. He grew up in a small school system, and him and his brothers were the quarterbacks. When his older brother was done, then it was his turn, and then his younger brother after him goes to Dayton as a quarterback, and he's like, I want to get on the field, and so he saw a need at tight end, and they spent 5 minutes at practice throwing him passes and running routes, and they said, okay, you're a tight end. And he's a guy that's continued the momentum. He was his conference's offensive player of the year. Every time I watched him, he was the best player on the field. And that continued at the Senior Bowl. He did a really nice job there against better competition. Has a little bit of juice as a blocker. But I think where he's really impressive is as a pass catcher. Not a blazer, ran a 4.80, which I think matches up with what the tape says. He's not a guy that's just going to, blow by safeties down the seam, but he's a really fluid athlete, and that really allows him to separate, give the quarterback a little sliver of separation at the top of routes, especially if he's going up against a linebacker or a safety. So I think Adam Troutman, yes, he's coming from the FCS level. There's going to be a jump in competition. But I think this guy is ready for it. He is a guy that is, as a pass catcher, as a blocker, I think he's ascending. I think he's getting better and better. So I'm going to bet on that athleticism. I'm going to bet on that just being a fluid big man. And I don't know that he's going to go. And this tight end class is weird because it's not. I don't know that we have a true top 50 pick in this tight end group. I think Cole Kmet from Notre Dame, he's got a shot to maybe go top 50, top 60. Troutman, he's right there in that mix, could sneak into the second round. But if he's available at the top of the third, I think he'd be a great option for the Redskins.
And it's funny because you talk about the 4.8, and when Jordan Reed was here, former quarterback, now he played at a higher level in college, former quarterback, not a blazer, but could win quick. And that was always a strength of his game, because if you can create that separation underneath, now you're creating yards after the catch as well. And so that's I think for a tight end, I want that as much as, especially for a young quarterback, give me a guy who can win fast. And so if you feel like that's kind of could be his game?
Yeah, no question. And two things, when I talked to him back in September, two things about Adam really stood out to me. First, his basketball background. He was a big basketball player growing up, and you see that on the football field because he does win quick. And
comparison there.
Exactly. And his ability to high point, his ability to go strong to the football over defenders, that's a really that's a part of his game, because it doesn't matter how good of a tight end you are. You're not a receiver who's going to, you're not Tyreek Hill. You're going to create that instant separation. You have to be able to catch the football with defenders draped all over you. And he was able to do that consistently. And then the other factor that really stood out to me with him, this dude is so competitive. He just wants to win. I mean, he was telling me about back in high school how, he played at a small school. There was, I think 21 players on his varsity team, he told me. And so just a very small team, small atmosphere. And he hated it because he was so competitive, but he was like one of the only ones on the team that said, that's going full go at practice. And he wants, that's how he's wired. So just that competitive spirit, that competitive tenacity is something that has really served him well at Dayton, at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine. And I think it'll continue to serve him well in the NFL. So I think this guy's for real. I don't think he's just a small school darling who's, flashes a little bit here and there. I think he's got legitimate NFL starting traits once he gets to the next level.
And then the last thing, Dane, I appreciate your time. Redskins also going to need, they have a bunch of needs, but receiver is another one. And I think they're going to try and solve some of their issues in free agency, but that may be difficult because the guys you like might not be there. Same at running back. Because this receiver class is so deep, are there guys in that third round that you say, like, this is, third, fourth round that could be, this is the guy to watch there. I think this guy could really blossom. And I think in your mock, I think you even had like Michael Pittman in the third round.
Yeah. It's just such a loaded class. I mean, and we're going to see, 6-7 tackles go in the first round. We're going to see pass rushers go early. And as good as this wide receiver class is, we're going to see a lot of teams say, yeah, we really do like Jerry Jeudy. We really do like CeeDee Lamb. But you know what? We feel really good about those receivers in the second, third round. And so we're going to get our pass rusher early, our corner, whatever. And it's going to push some of these wide receivers down. So we're going to have second round graded receivers go in the third round, and third round graded receivers go in the fourth round. So there's no question. If the Redskins wanted to wait until the fourth round, I think they'd still find tremendous value there. A guy like Gabriel Davis from UCF could go in the third round, but wouldn't be shocked if he's still around in the fourth. KJ Hill, more of a slot option out of Ohio State. I think he's a guy that in a lot of years would be in the top 100. But in this draft, good chance, he's more in the fourth round range. If you're looking for maybe more of an athletic marvel who you want to develop, that's Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan, who former top recruit, 5-star guy, didn't have the career that many people thought, still needs to grow as pay attention to some of the details of the position in terms of his route running and getting open. But, he showed at the combine how he's just a physical marvel, and there's a lot of athletic traits there that you can work with. Van Jefferson from Florida, who unfortunately we didn't see at the combine because of a fracture in his foot, one of the best route runners in this class. And because of the injury, because we don't necessarily have those times on him from the combine, maybe he gets lost in the shuffle and he's available in that early fourth round. So, this is just a wide receiver class that you can wait on your guy and still feel comfortable with who you're going to get in the third or fourth round.
Dane, listen, I appreciate your time. Folks, check him out with The Athletic and also on Twitter at DP Brugler. Very, very informative. And I, like I said, I've kind of followed your rise here as an Ohio guy. I know Terry Pluto would always go to you and use you, and I thought that was very wise on his part. You offer a lot of great insight, and I appreciate you joining me.
Well, I appreciate that. Anytime, John.
After this break, I'll be back with a quick wrap-up. Welcome back. Well, this is the silly season, so be careful with all the rumors and social media player postings that will occur over the next month or two. Last year, we saw it with Stephon Diggs. A lot of rumors about him and the Redskins based on his Instagram postings, and we're seeing it again with him as well. The other day, Dwayne Haskins posted something on Instagram with Diggs in a Redskins uniform. What does it mean? Well, who knows? They're boys. Listen, Diggs, I do believe, would welcome a trade out of Minnesota. I've been told by a few people that he'd like to be the guy somewhere. Unless he's clearly the number one, I wonder if he'll be happy anywhere. If he came here, he would have Terry McLaurin, who would take a lot of work. But Diggs is a very good receiver, and I think there are some people who would consider him their number one if he comes here. What I do know is that Haskins and Diggs have a long-time relationship. When Haskins was in high school, he'd organize throwing sessions to receivers, and Diggs, then at Maryland, would often join him. That stuff helps. They are boys. But if Diggs continues to be unhappy in a situation, I wonder, is that somebody that Rivera would want to bring in? Would he feel like a change of scenery would be good? Who knows? What I have been told by a few people, though, and the Vikings have said this publicly, but it's also what you hear privately, is that they don't have any interest in trading him, that they consider him part of their future. And when they're putting together the roster for this year, they view him as a key part of that. That is what they've said, at least. Anyway, as you know, everything will be analyzed and overanalyzed in the coming months. Enjoy. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you very much to The Athletic's Dane Brugler for joining me again. Check out his work. You can in The Athletic, but also follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. Really good insight into the draft. Really worked his way up to be in a good spot. that he is in now, so worth a follow. And also, thank you for listening. I have a very good guest coming up later this week, ESPN's Bill Barnwell. We're going to talk about the Redskins roster as the Redskins and everybody else heads into free agency. Talk to you then.